What is the zeta function? Added my resume, dear, with a lot of information that is only known to those who study these things. So the zeta formula is actually a way of interpreting the conflagration of the earliest access to creation. So the earliest access to creation has to be the point at which there is a confluence of the factors that will result in the multiplication of the same reflection. So in other words, the commencement of the creative process had to have been an explosive event. There had to be an explosive event that resulted in what you call the lover and the beloved. And it had to explode out of the singularity that you call love. And so for you, the Trinity consists of the singularity of love and the lover and the beloved, which is the duality. And so from this explosive event, there had to be a continual reflection of the duality and the Trinity in everything you see, right? You agree with that, don't you, Steph? I do, because I don't have the mathematical background to understand what you're saying, but I certainly can know it conceptually. So conceptually, there had to be a factor that would allow all of these things to come together in a way that would eternally reflect the initial explosive event that resulted in the duality and the Trinity, right? Because those are the fundamental aspects of my theory of tripling the energy throughout eternity. Okay, so what you're saying, Mr. Reimann, is that you came at this from a mathematical background and point of view, looking at the numbers, how they work together. Whereas I came at it from looking at the aspects of Earth life, how it worked. In other words, you figured out that you had the numbers, and you're working with the numbers that would be the foundation of the reality that we know. I was looking at the reality that we know and trying to sift through it to find the essential nature of reality. So it was like I was inversely engineering it, and you were starting from the baseline and engineering it, or coming to see how it's engineered, is what I should say. You figured there had to be a creative start, which I guess I did too, but I just didn't put it into mathematical language, not beyond what I could see, which was the zero, the importance of zero as the repository of all of creation, of all of everything that could be perceived. So, not that different, Steph, not that different. So, the zeta function is the ability of the multiplicity of numbers to always reflect back to the inherent trust on the singularity, the duality, and the trinity, you see. Okay, I don't know anything about the Zeta function. I will look it up so that maybe I can understand what you're telling me in terms of what people say about it. Try that and then come back to me with any questions you have, okay? All right, I will. Oh, I looked it up on Wikipedia. Way too complex for me. I would have to spend a lot of time trying to understand this language in order to understand how your essential explanation conforms to the way it is set up in the numerical language. The bottom line, Steph, is that the understanding that you have of the nature of reality is based on an intuitive and highly discriminatory ability to perceive of the rationality of the numbers. What do I mean by that? Do you even know what a rational number is? No. Okay, well, the rationality of the numbers has to do with the ability to interact in a coherent way. And so when you think of how you see the world structured, you see that everything is based on the singularity, the duality, and the trinity, right? Yes, I do see that. And so no matter what, you can always reduce it down. And you can say, hey, I don't know how it got this way, but this is the way it is. And so when somebody says to you, hello, my name is John, and I trust on being a star seed that came from the Pleiadians, and I'm here to help you figure out how to live in peace and harmony. And you say, fuck you. Because how would you know how to live in peace and harmony if you didn't understand the rationality of life on Earth, you see? If you came from the Pleiadians, you wouldn't even be a number that could be computed in the equation of life on Earth. And so you would be an imaginary number. And you would have to be the product of the relationship between the relativity of the two. So there would be a relative relationship between the rational numbers and the imaginary numbers, because the imaginary numbers are incapable of being reduced to a trust on the existing platform of reality. And so they have a part to play in the story because they exist as a temporary placeholder for the totality of existence, you see. Sometimes there are gaps in the way that the rational numbers will work together, and they are filled with these imaginary numbers until there can be a relaxation in the trajectory that will help to explain how they came to be. And then they will cease to function in any way other than in the way that they can be reduced to the common denominators, you see. So the common denominators for all of reality are the singularity, the duality, and the trinity. And so you might say to that person, well, prove to me that you're from the Pleiades. And they might say, well, I just know it. I just know it. I don't have to prove it to you. And I'm here to help you. And you say, help me do what? And they say, help you to grow. And you say, grow to what? And they say, well, grow. And you say, well, where are you going to grow to? And they say, well, you're so stupid, you don't understand this, so I'm just going to go away and find somebody who's smarter than you. And you say goodbye. And they go away because they can't play in reality. They cannot play in reality because they are exposed as imaginary. So the imaginary numbers are ones that are capable of reduction to a particular state, but they exist as a placeholder, you might say, for the trust on the information that remains to be discovered, you see. So there is a lot of information in reality that remains to be discovered. And this is cool because this means that you can go to school and learn it all, and there's still more to learn when you get out of school. And so for those people who are trying to resolve these issues, they are using their ability the best they can because they have to trust on a certain amount of unknowns. And those unknowns are where you will find the truth that has so far escaped the ken of the people who think that they know it all. They don't know it all. They will never know it all. And that's why the proof of the theorems is a little tricky, you see, because it involves some aspects of reality that are currently unknown to them. And so they might not be able to wrap their heads around the proof that you would provide. However, we will continue to work on the proofs. And when you have time, you can spend some time getting caught up on the literature of the times and the understanding of the nature of the notation to describe what you already understand. So you already understand this in a way that doesn't play to the mathematical crowd because your ability to comprehend the nature of reality is so profound that it cannot sound rational to them. So you would just be an imaginary number because you understand things they don't understand. And you can reduce it to the singularity and the duality and the trinity, which is the hallmark of the trust on reality. That reality is a combination of factors that all reduce down to the understanding that the singularity, the duality, and the trinity are the three corners of the trajectory. I heard you say that your numerical identity in the way that people play on Earth when they try to find their number from their birth date is 27/9. And as you know, this is one of the most profound numbers in the history of numerology. However, it can cover a broad band of individuals who have different talents, but they all tend to be very evolved in their ability to intuit a certain reality. And they're not all mathematicians, and they're not all authors, and they're not all singers, and they're not all this and that. Because within that broad base of individuals, there are finer distinctions, of course, that would define them. And as you say, 9 is the disappearing number, because, of course, it is the triple thing of the Trinity. And so it is a number that disappears whenever it appears to be added to another number in this system, you see, because if you add 9 to 6, for example, you get 15, and 1 and 5 is 6. And so it is the magic number. It is the number of the cat in the hat. It is the number of the ability to disappear and return over and over and over again, so that nobody can pin you down. Because when they try to add their reality to yours, you see, all they see is themselves in the mirror. They just see themselves in the mirror. And so they can't pin you down. And yet, you are the magic number because you have 2 primes and you have the triple Trinity. And so you can slide in and out of their reality and they won't even know it, you see, because they can't follow you through the windows. So it's like saying that you can slip through one Trinity and into another and into another, and they can't catch up with you. And the number 9 has a reputation of being very, very highly evolved when it is applied to numerology and the individual, you see. And so this reflects the power that comes to you because in everything you do and everything you say, there is a reflection of your own energy. And so all the synchronicity in your life is the ability to understand the Trinity, that the ability to reverse engineer reality, as you say, is the ability to understand the initial creative element. And the initial creative element cannot be translated into any language, not even mathematics. It can only be understood. It can only be understood. Whether people think of it as the Big Bang or the nature of dark matter, that is something they can't pin down. They can only try to know it by its effects, right? They only know it by its effects. Right. That's what I always say. They only know it by its effects. They only know the photon by its effects. Somebody will one day say, why didn't we think about these things? Why didn't we think about these things before we started to play so high and mighty that we thought that life was reduced to a duality and not a trinity? Because they consistently see themselves and their reality as mirroring the same thing without one part, you see, right? Yes, I think you're referring to what I call limited application of principle, that they always take themselves out of the equation. They always think that they're the observer without being intrinsically involved in uh, the nature of things in the equation. Yes. And in order to understand this, they would have to understand the Trinity. However, the people who are trusting on the darkest part of reality are the ones who can't even understand the duality. They live in a non-dual universe where they trust on being hot or cold, but they can't trust on mixing the two, you see? Because you're either one or the other. You're either one or the other. You're either a Democrat or you're a Republican. Put it in language that people can understand, but you cannot mix the two. And so they have to be left behind because they exist on the fringes of reality. They exist on the fringes of reality and are not part of the conceptual universe that many think of as imaginary because it has not yet been revealed to them how it functions. And so the function of the zeta symbol, so to speak, is the function of the trust on being hot or cold. That you live in an undual universe where you are always just one thing and you don't understand that there has to be a complicit reality that exists beside you. And that if there's a complicit reality that exists beside you, then there has to be something that holds them together. There has to be some notation for the interrelationship of the two sides of the equation, right? Oh, okay. I don't understand math and all those formulas and stuff. But what I hear you saying is that I can only go as far as the algebraic equation. But the algebraic equation is an equality. And so zero, but to me, zero is the capacity or the factor that holds them together, right? Yes, exactly. Zero is the uniting factor of both sides of the equation. And so, no matter how you do it, you always come back to God, you see. You always come back to God. You always come back to the big zero in the sky, as you call it, where everything is contained. And so, if you perceive of it as a function of reality, that everything is contained within the zero, then it has to unfold in a certain way that will reflect the duality and the Trinity, right? Yes. There has to be this and that, and there has to be the arms that contain them, so to speak. There has to be the fluidity of the energy that contains them, keeps them from flying apart or never being able to connect again. You know, East and West could never connect again. And so that's why they're calling this village that we're creating East West, because it's what holds them together, East and West. up and down, to put it simply, in simple terms that people can usually understand, that right and left, there's a right and there's a left. But there's something that holds them together. When we think of it, we think of ourselves in the middle as what's holding it together, that we would then be the zero. I don't know, I'm just talking here. We would be the zero because up and down would be held together by the fact that we're in the middle. Up is always up from our perspective, and down from our perspective, and right and left, and etc. So we are the third element. We are the God factor. And the God factor is us. So I don't know. What do you think? What am I talking about? Yes, you are the God factor. And I am the God factor. Because we are both, you see. We are both the God factor that holds East and West together. And we are the ones that are either looking east or looking west, you might say. So we are the two directions, and we are also the force that holds them together, and that is the Trinity, right? Yes. And so we are all three. So we are the singularity that is the Trinity, right? Yes. And so when God takes himself and separates himself into the lover and the beloved, he retains the essential nature of love that holds them together. So love is the glue that holds the lover and the beloved together forever, right? Yes. Okay. So I understand this, but you're saying that you put all this, or we worked on putting all this into a mathematical language. Yes. And that mathematical language has an ability. I have limited interest, I guess you might say. I kind of like puzzles, so mathematics could be fun to get into all those puzzles. But essentially, what you're saying is these are all different ways that you can put the puzzle together, and it will be sound. In other words, if you create that bridge, it's going to be held up because the principles are sound, because you detected the principles. Whether you did that by trial and error, or eventually that trial and error resulted in a mathematical formula by which you could use, and engineers could design bridges. So these patterns are inherent. And so what you're talking about is really pointing out these patterns. But for you, you couldn't point out the patterns of the duality, the two sides of the equation, without also understanding the sort of the unwritten thing that they're held together by the glue. And the problem here is that most people that I know, and most people call themselves scientists, write themselves out of the equation. And so that's what I call the limited application of principle, that they don't see reality as, they don't see themselves as being part of the very reality that they see. They think they stand outside of it somehow. Rest assured that there are few people in the world today who can understand what I say when I say to you that the inability to put yourself into the equation is the inability to understand the God factor. It is the inability to understand that we're talking about you. We're not talking about something outside of you. We're talking about the very nature of what you are. We are talking about you. And although I may talk in a numerical way, I still understand that we are talking about ultimate reality. And you can call it what you want, but it's always you. It is always the I that says, I'm here today. I'm here today. I'm here today to say this or that or the other. And whatever you say, it is part of the Trinity. It is part of the flow of energy that goes on and on and on. And it can't be changed. You cannot change the formula, the essential nature of reality. There can be gaps that you don't understand or that haven't developed yet, because let's say that it's a developing process. There could be parts of life and experience that have not yet come into view. They have not appeared, they have not been created even, they have not filled in the gaps, you see. But they are still going to follow the same pattern. They're still going to appear in the same pattern. And so that's the best I can say today. Let's take it up again. And I want to thank Greta Jane for these questions. And I hope she can understand the theoretical concepts that we're presenting here. Although Steph does not have the understanding of the mathematics, hopefully those who do can comprehend the connection between the theorems and the relativity of the creative process to its inception, you see. Its inception is solid, but it cannot be translated into a language that can convey to another the understanding of ultimate reality unless you have taken it upon yourself to explore yourself. That is the bottom line. Thank you, Mr. Reed. Thank you very much.